came up short yesterday.
Here are the indisputable facts of this shutdown. Republicans want to pay the troops, and we have shown that with our actions and our votes now 9 times. And the Democrats want to use them as hostages to extort $1.5 trillion in new, unserious partisan spending that we just won't go along with.
And the Senate on Tuesday failed to reach the 60 votes needed. Next chance will be this afternoon. Ukrainian officials have been meeting with prominent American weapons manufacturers. Here's White House correspondent Greg Clugston.
The delegation from Ukraine met with representatives of Lockheed Martin and Raytheon during a U.S. visit. It came ahead of President Zelensky's meeting with President Trump at the White House on Friday. Zelensky is widely expected to request approval to obtain Tomahawk cruise missiles, which could allow Ukraine to strike targets deep into Russia. This past weekend, Donald Trump said he may give the go-ahead if Moscow doesn't end its war soon. Greg Clugston, Washington.
Hamas has been slowly returning the bodies of dead hostages to Israel.
The Trump plan recognizes that finding the bodies of all 28 dead hostages in the rubble will take time, but Israel was expecting more than 4. Israel accused Hamas of violating the ceasefire and said it would restrict the flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza. Shortly afterwards, Hamas handed over 4 more bodies to the Red Cross. It's not clear if this will be enough to resolve the dispute, but no doubt it will not be the last one.
Meanwhile, the Israeli military says one of the bodies handed over by Hamas the previous day as part of the ceasefire deal is not that of a hostage who was held in Gaza. 4 bodies had been handed over by Hamas on Tuesday, following the first 4 on Monday. More from townhall.com.
Wesley Financial Group is not a law firm.
Hi, I'm Chuck McDowell, the timeshare cancellation guy. In 2011, I founded Wesley Financial Group with one goal in mind: to help honest folks out of their timeshares permanently. Today, I run Wesley with my 2 sons, a real family business, treating every client and every employee like we'd want our own family treated. That philosophy has helped us grow into the largest, most trusted timeshare cancellation company in the United States. Fortune magazine even recognized us as one of the best places to work. Why? Because we genuinely care. In fact, some of our former clients were so moved by their experience working with us, they joined our team so they could help others to timeshare freedom. If you're stuck in a timeshare, give us a call. Let our family help your family.
Call Wesley now for your free timeshare exit kit. 800-226-5454. That's 800-226-5454. 800-226-5454.
The Trump administration is backing a Texas-based company's plan to repair and reopen a West Coast oil pipeline responsible for a major spill about 10 years ago.
It was one of California's worst oil spills off the Santa Barbara coast in 2015 when the corroded pipeline burst. Sable Offshore says it wants to work with California to send oil through the line again, but if state regulators don't allow that, then it will turn to operating solely in federal waters and will transport the oil via tankers. The project is opposed by environmentalists who say there's no guarantee against future spills. Rich Thomason, Washington.
The government shutdown causing some problems for the nation's overtaxed aviation system. An air traffic control tower near Los Angeles closed for 6 hours, less than a week into the shutdown because of a shortage of controllers. More on these stories at townhall.com. A Florida judge has temporarily blocked the planned transfer of prime downtown Miami, Florida land for Donald Trump's future presidential library.
Circuit Judge Mabel Ruiz issued the order. This comes days after Miami activists alleged that local college officials violated Florida's open government law. The activist says officials at that school broke the law by giving the sizable plot of real estate to the state of Florida. The state then voted to transfer the land to the foundation for the planned presidential library.
That is Andrew Stewart reporting. Ever feel like you're walking 3 steps forward, 2 steps back? Well, don't feel so bad. Turns out it could be good for you. Backward walking, also known as retro walking or reverse walking, is said to add variety to an exercise routine. The experts say turning around not only provides a change of view, but also makes different demands on your body, which is all part of your fitness. More of these stories at townhall.com.
The following is an America Matters media production. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of the station or its advertisers, although we think they should. But that's the opinion of America Matters Media.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Re-Federalist Radio, hosted by Zachy Radio, where we take a look at current events through an original intent of the Constitution lens. I am Brady, also known as Warhamster, and joining me as usual, my good friend, constitutional mentor, Mr. Constitution himself, Douglas V. Gibbs.
And always, thanks for having me.
Yeah, long time no talk. We just got done a really fun show going through Madison's notes, and the star today was our favorite anti-hero, Alexander Hamilton. So you're going to want to check that out later.
And I want to say something real quick, and this is off topic. It's real quick because, see, I have this love of sports, and I get ragged all the time, and I love also dealing it out. So I only have 4 words for Warhamster. How about those Indiana Hoosiers?
Well, that one hurts. All right, that one hurts.
Yeah, now I've got my friend Ron. He and I are the Dodgers. God, I hope the Mariners do well. But anyway, go ahead.
We're not doing sports talk today because that wouldn't be fair to Doug because he is a lifelong Angels fan. And anyways, we digress.
It's a long drought with 1 World Series in the middle.
Go Padres. Never mind. All right. Before we get in, let's thank everyone listening on America Matters Radio, 93.7 KPGF, AM 1060, and all of you listening on the affiliate networks and stations, especially ZachyRadio.com. All right. We got a very important topic today. The Supreme Court, as we're sitting here right now, are hearing live arguments in a case that's going to decide a racial redistricting. Could I buy a vowel today? Jeez, what is going on?
Yeah, well, it's all those long words that Hamilton uses still got you messed up. So.
No, I feel like I just went to the dentist or something. I'm waiting for the Novocaine to wear off. Anyway, the case is kind of a big deal. And we're going to spend.
And this ties into the Voting Rights Act, which, from a constitutional viewpoint, was unconstitutional in the first place. But we'll get to the details of that. Go ahead.
Yeah, we're absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're just going to read a really good summary of it. Okay. This is an article on SCOTUS blog, a wonderful resource written by Amy Howe on October 10th. And she says the Supreme Court will hear oral arguments on Wednesday, October 15th in Louisiana versus Calais. I think that's pronounced like that. A challenge to the congressional map that Louisiana adopted in 2024 that may reshape the Voting Rights Act, as Doug said. It is the second go-round at the court for this dispute in less than a year. The justices heard arguments in the case for the first time in March, but didn't decide it during the 24-25 term. And here's a brief explainer on the long, complicated history. So we'll talk to you about the 3 real big governing documents here that they're going to be referring to are, of course, the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment, and the 1965 Voter Rights Act. And we'll go through those in detail as we go. But let's jump into the background. The dispute begins in 2022. Louisiana passed a 1-majority black district out of the 6 seats in the state, although roughly a third of the state's population is black. So, of course, a group of black voters went to federal court, and they argued that it violated the Voting Rights Act, which prohibits election practices that result in a denial or abridgment of the right to vote based on race.
And there's another step there also in the Voting Rights Act, which it requires any time that a state makes changes, and more specifically southern states, make any changes to their voting laws, they have to get congressional permission first.
Yeah, let's hear some background. What was the reason the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965 is a lot of southern states were discriminating against black people by gerrymandering their districts and doing other things to try to suppress the vote.
This is on the heels of the 24th Amendment, which got rid of a poll tax.
Yeah, so this was a real problem they were addressing. The problem, which we'll see, is they created a reverse racism type situation. And that's what they're struggling with here, in 30,000-foot view.
They're playing a game that's similar to what some of you might know as affirmative action. We have to make a group equal by giving them a boost up. But if you read the language in the 14th Amendment, that's not what it says. Equal protection under the law.
Which we will be doing. And they're going to make these arguments based on race, but this is absolutely politicized. This is a Democrat Republican. How do you get more voters? Then to try to pretend
Absolutely, it is.
And that's, I was listening to some of the oral arguments, and that was one of the first things that Clarence Thomas asked the one of the attorneys that was on the side of the black voters who filed the suit. So that just, this is, a lot of it's going to talk about race, but remember, this is all politicized.
And I want to for the viewers / listeners, if you have a pocket constitution, what we're going to discuss eventually here too is Article 1, Section 4. So definitely open your constitution to that. All right, go ahead.
All right, in 2024, the Louisiana legislature drew a new map. Okay, so I'm sorry, I missed the part. So federal court agreed with the black voters that the 2022 map violated Section 2, barred the state from using their new map for future congressional elections, and redirected the state to draw a new plan. The U.S. Court of Appeals of the Fifth Circuit upheld that ruling. So they go back to the drawing board and submit a new map for 2024 known as SB 8. SB 8 is what is being disputed here. And this created a second majority black district. The terminology here is majority minority. The practice has been pretty much since 65 to create a lot of districts, even though they may be shaped like a salamander. Just that they, you just want to have, so you get 60% of the voters, of a certain color or language that they speak or what have you. The problem with that is if you have 60% of people in district that are black, and you have 40% that are white, and it shows predominantly that in America right now, people vote for party lines almost among race, although fortunately that's changing a lot because people don't all think alike just because they have the same skin color. We do have different
and there are certain groups such as Hispanics and blacks that they're actually taking a position that because they're realizing, oh, wait a second, they take advantage of us, they're taking us for granted, so they're not appreciating that position. They're realizing that just because grandma was Democrat, just because dad was Democrat, doesn't mean I have to be Democrat, or vice versa.
All right, I think that should take us to the break, and we'll continue on the other side.
At Northern Nevada Family Dental, we are proud to announce a wide range of advanced dental services by way of the Photona Lightwalker Laser. The Lightwalker Laser can efficiently and effectively treat most periodontal problems, from deep persistent pocketing to peri-implantitis and a multitude of conditions in between. Have cold sores? We can inhibit the cycle of the virus and sometimes even prevent them from occurring. Do you have a snoring or CPAP problem? Through the amazing healing power of light, we can treat tissues inside the mouth without anesthesia, appliances, or cutting, so that after just one treatment, most people sleep better and quieter that same night. By using the power of the laser intraorally, we can also smooth facial wrinkles and tighten sagging necklines, all without you having to be numb, and there's no downtime. It can even be done on a lunch break. Through the FDA-approved Power of Light, these treatments and many more are now available at Northern Nevada Family Dental in Sparks. Have I piqued your interest? Give us a call at 626-7772 or visit us at northernnevadafamilydental.com.
Barbecue, the Butcher's Kitchen, would like to thank every customer for your loyalty and continued support through these challenging times. Call for takeout and delivery of rib tips, brisket, ahi, tuna, roasted veggies, and much more. Barbecue's open from 11 to 7, Monday through Saturday, and delivers hot food safe and healthy. Call 499-5855 for details. 499-5855 Barbecue, as featured on diners, drive-ins, and dives. Get real. Get into Barbecue Reno.
The nonprofit Reno Sparks Assistance League Thrift Shop offers quality merchandise, including a selection of women's and children's apparel and shoes, books for every age, baby clothes, accessories, sporting goods, toys, housewares, linens, home decor, and seasonal items and jewelry, all at affordable prices. Come in the shop, donate, or join this all-volunteer organization. Assistance League Thrift Shop, open Monday through Saturday, 10 to 4 at 1701 Vassar Street in Reno.
Unable to listen to the whole show? A recording of today's program will be available later today. Visit americamatters.us and click on the podcast link. Now back to the show.
on SCOTUS blog. Says a different group of voters who describes themselves as non-African American contended that the 2024 map was unconstitutional racial gerrymander. That is impermissibly sorted voters based primarily on their race in violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. A 3-judge district court agreed with them and barred the state from using the map in congressional elections. So what we have here is one group taking an interpretation of the Voting Rights Act and the other group taking their interpretation of the 14th Amendment. In such a case, Doug, does an act like the Voter Rights Act supersede the Constitution?
Well, no, and also there's two things going on here. It's not just whether or not it is in line with the 14th Amendment, and also whether or not it's in line with Article 1, Section 4, which says the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature there, but the Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations except as the places of choosing senators. In other words, Congress can make a law to alter regulations that they believe a state is using that may be tyrannical or outside the Constitution or the law. It does not say that they can make a law ahead of time about it. In other words, the Voting Rights Act is a law made saying, hey, you better not do this or we got you. That's not how this is worded. It's worded that state makes a law and the Congress goes, whoa, that's a little off. We need to make a law negating that.
Yeah, let's take a look.
So the very existence of the Voting Rights Act, aside from the 14th Amendment, including Article 1, Section 4, is unconstitutional.
And I'll just read Article 1, Section 4 real quick. I have it right here.
I just read it. Oh, are you talking about the Constitution? I just read it.
Oh, you did it verbatim?
Yeah.
Okay. I was still looking for it on my screen, so I kind of tuned in. All right.
I got you, man. I got you.
I appreciate
that.
And
when it comes, and here's the thing, getting back to the Equal Protection Clause, it does not say you make laws so that it's equality of result. It's equal protection under the law. In other words, the law will be applied exactly the same across the board.
Yeah, it's just, reverse discrimination is still discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
All right, continuing. Supreme Court put the 3-judge district court's decision on hold in May of 2024, allowing the state to use the 2024 map in that year's elections. Voters in the newly drawn district elected Cleo Fields, who had represented a majority black district in Congress for 2 terms during the 90s until the districts were redrawn. Louisiana and the black voters who had challenged the 2022 map appealed the 3-judge district court's decision to the Supreme Court, which in last November set the case for oral argument. The dispute initially focused on the 2024 map itself, specifically whether the lower court was correct when it concluded that the second majority black district was an unconstitutional racial gerrymander. Okay. And again, both parties have done gerrymandering throughout history. It is a problem, but there's mathematical solutions. There's a effort at a group called, what are they called? I got that around here somewhere. How'd I lose it? Okay. Based out of Princeton, I believe, that's, all for doing mathematical analysis of how gerrymandering should be done. And it's an incredibly left-leaning analysis. There's also groups that are equally doing the same from the right. The bottom line is, if the left side, the Democrats have done a better job of gerrymandering over the years than the Republicans have. That's starting to swing as we see some of these red states grab a couple extra districts. Texas just grabbed 5 more districts.
And let's understand, in Texas, that's not gerrymandering by the Republicans. It's undoing the gerrymandering that was in place by the Democrats, making the districts more of a reasonable shape rather than these arms sticking out in all directions to try to going back to the whole point of gerrymandering, when Elbridge Gerry was governor, and there was and he approved a redistricting for the state Senate. This is before all of the states were doing one per county, and a newspaper reporter looked at it and says, well, it looks like a salamander, and that's where the word gerrymander comes from, where you have these arms going out in all directions, these tendrils trying to influence the vote, and that's what it is. It's an influence of the vote.
And what they're trying in California right now, the Oceanside, which is near and dear to both Doug and my heart, currently has its own congressional district for the most part. Now they're going to draw the map so Oceanside split in half. When part of Oceanside is actually leaps over the rest of North County and joins a district which includes Palm Springs, which, if you know California, that is ridiculous.
One of the things they did to put all the Republicans into one district a couple elections ago is they put the area just north of Camp Pendleton, all those cities right there in the same district with Temecula. They're on the other side of the mountain from each other. But what it did is it went from 2 Republican districts to 1.
Yeah, that's really a strategy right there. That's how they do it. And it's dirty, but there's always there's this ruling right here may change that quite a bit. At stake here, somewhere around 25 or more seats that could be redistricted before the 2026 primaries.
And that's why these elections are so important. And you Californians, if this bothers you, if this angers you, I mean, there's a candidate for governor out there right now, Leo Zaki, leozaki.com, which is, on our side with this. He's like, wait a second, this isn't right. So, definitely do your research on your candidates.
Yeah, and Leo is also a good friend and kind enough to be the sponsor of our radio show. So another reason to like Leo. All right, jumping back.
And I'm asking the audience, regardless of whether or not he's behind this show or anyway, do your research. Go to all of because there's the front runners and the names. You got the Chad Bianco, you got Steve Hilton. Don't forget to check out people like Leo Zaki. Make your comparisons. Because I believe that a candidate like Leo Zaki could turn the whole state on its head if he was to get into the governorship. leozaki.com.
Very good. Continuing on. Louisiana and the black voters defended the 2024 map. Louisiana contended. So Louisiana, okay, let's see what they said. Louisiana is now on the side of supporting their new map, not the one that was 5-1, the one that's 4-2. They contended it was caught between the proverbial rock and a hard place. In the challenge by the black voters, it argued the district court had concluded that the 2022 map, with only one majority black district, likely violated Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. The state therefore opted to draw a new map with a second majority black district to comply with the district court's ruling. But once it made that decision, the state said its focus shifted to drawing a map that would protect some of the state's powerful Republican incumbents, including Speaker of their House Mike Johnson and Rep. Julia Letlow, who sits on the House Appropriations Committee. So they're basically making two defenses here. We complied with the court's ruling, but now our new map isn't based on race-based. It's based on we did it for political purposes, which is an admission of dirty politics, but they're using that as their argument, that it wasn't racial in 2024. The black voters then echoed the state's argument because the state says that politics, rather than race, was the focus of its redistricting decisions. What I just said. They contended the Supreme Court's cases require the non-African American voters to meet the high bar of showing that race was the primary factor in the legislature's decision to enact the map, a showing that they said the challengers cannot make. This is what I just said. They're trying to say that you cannot argue that the map is racist.
Or that in any of the ways that they've been doing it has to do with race if it doesn't fit the left-wing narrative. You can't prove, well, they did it for that reason.
It's interesting that the state of Louisiana, has taken that position. The non-African American voters told the justices that as the 3-judge district court concluded, it was, in quotes, utterly implausible that race and politics played equal roles in the drawing of the 2024 map. The legislature decided first to draw the second majority black district, they said. It was only after that decision had been made, they argued that the Republicans then had to choose which Republican to sacrifice. And to the extent that the state's focus was to comply with the Voting Rights Act, they continued that just shows that race was the legislature's main motivation when it drew the second majority black district. That's a pretty strong argument, I would think.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And once again, the equal protection under the law is not equity in result. It's it's equity and opportunity, and it's equity under the law. Remember, when you look at that statue of Lady Justice, right? She's got the scale in one hand and the sword in the other, but what's over her eyes? Blindfold. She's supposed to be blind to all of these things. The law is supposed to be blind to everything except for the law. The Constitution is the law of the land. And man, once again, we have laws being made that are not based on equal protection, but on a seeking of equity in results.
So here's where it gets really interesting. I'm going to get this next paragraph, and then we'll jump to Clarence Thomas's dissent after the break, because we got about another 90 seconds to go. There's no way to know exactly why the justices opted to schedule the case for another argument. The brief order that the court issued on June 27th, which Doug and I covered, which was the last term's final day before the justices' summer recess, simply indicated, without any explanation, that the dispute was restored to the calendar for re-argument, and that in due course, the court would issue a follow-up order on scheduling and any additional questions to be addressed in the supplemental briefing. That's interesting, because that leads me to believe that enough justices thought that the case hadn't been argued properly the first time. We want to hear this again. Mm-hmm. We're going to hear this again. Here's what we want you to be arguing, which they would tell us more later on as we go along in the story. Let's see. We got about 30 seconds before the break. I don't want to jump into Clarence Thomas's comment at this point. I want to give that its full justice. I don't want to race through it, but it's pretty much when I'm reading this article, it's exactly what I was thinking. Again, there's a number of things that, if they go the right direction, Republicans can get pretty close to a supermajority in the House of Representatives, no matter what happens in elections. It's just by the redistricting if it's done correctly. Anyway, we'll talk about that when we get back from the break.
Did you realize that radio advertising doesn't cost? It pays. America Matters Media has an opening for a person who would like to represent our sales department on a full or part-time commission basis. Prior sales experience preferable. So, if you have good presentation, negotiation, organization, and communication skills, America Matters wants to talk to you. Contact Eddie Floyd, 775-384-4444. Do it today.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting. A teenager. Learning the lingo.
Today I'm going to help parents translate teen slang. Now, when a teen says something is on fleek, it's exactly like saying, that's rad. It simply means that something is awesome or cool. Another one is totes. It's exactly like saying, totally, just shorter. As in, I totes love going to the mall with Becca. Another word you might hear is jelly. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will think you're, rad, just the same. To learn more, visit adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Reno's Veterans Guest House is the home away from home that provides temporary overnight lodging for veterans or family members receiving medical care in the Reno area, some from hundreds of miles away, like veteran Joy Brown.
I'm a Navy veteran, and I go quite often due to my service-connected disabilities, and it gives me a place to stay because there's no way I can drive back and forth.
Veterans Guest House receives no government money. It's privately supported by people like you.
Please support the guest house. Thank you.
Find out how you can help at veteransguesthouse.org.
Are you shy and don't want to talk on the air? Text us your questions or comments to 775-237-2266. Now back to the show.
All right, we're getting ready to get into a dissent from Clarence Thomas. I wanted to give it full justice. I'm going to go, when this show is over, I'll be listening to the 2 or 3 hours of oral arguments. I only got about 30 minutes in before the show. But what I'm going to be listening for are the questions from Justice Roberts and Kavanaugh. Those are going to be the swing votes in this. And the nature of their questioning will tell us how this is going to go. We're not going to get a decision. We hopefully we're going to get one by the end of December. And I would give legislatures enough time to get there before the 2026 primaries to do anything that needed to be done. So this should be done relatively quickly, but nobody's given us a firm indication. All right, so Justice Clarence Thomas dissented from the decision to hear re-argument in the case. In his view, there's an intractable conflict between Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act and the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. To the extent that the Supreme Court's interpretation of the VRA violates the 14th Amendment, he wrote he would make clear that the Constitution controls.
And understand, this is a man who in the 2019 Garland versus United States case said, if there is a ruling or an opinion by the Supreme Court or any federal court that's egregiously unconstitutional, it needs to be changed. It needs to be flipped. So what he's saying is just because the court said something in the past doesn't mean it stands.
Yeah, and there's been a number of cases throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and even more recent, that have sort of addressed this issue, and they have always fallen on the side of the reverse discrimination redistricting. We're seeing that shift in a lot of this Supreme Court's recent decisions of the last couple of years as they've moved more and more closer to the right direction of federalism and original intent, and with Justice Thomas leading the way. All right, so into more detail. We've talked about this a bit already, but let's listen to their words. On August 1st, the Supreme Court issued an order instructing the litigants to file new briefs addressing, this is over the summer, this is what they want them to talk about when they re-argue, whether the state's intentional creation of a second majority-minority district violates either the 14th Amendment, which bars the government from treating similarly situated people differently, or the 15th Amendment, which prohibits the government from denying or restricting voting rights based on race. Now, Doug, I was surprised they brought the 15th Amendment in here because we're not restricting or denying voting rights with these gerrymandering.
Right.
So I'll be interested to hear that argument. But the Supreme Court wanted to hear an argument on the 15th Amendment. Maybe that came from one of the liberal judges to try to give them another out. I don't know. That's my guess. In a brief filed on August 27th, Louisiana no longer defended the 2024 map. It told the justices that race-based redistricting, even if done to comply with Section 2, is unconstitutional. Quoting the Supreme Court's 2023 decision in Students for Fair Admissions versus President and Fellows of Harvard College, which struck down the use of race in admissions at colleges and universities, the state declared that eliminating racial discrimination means eliminating all of it. That's a bit of a flip-flop by Louisiana, would you not admit?
No, absolutely. And understand, and Louisiana is basically, I think, saying this in a sense, that the Equal Protection Clause is designed to protect individuals, not groups. When you use a affirmative action style idea, you unfairly penalize individuals by giving preference to other groups based on their race, rather than merit or qualifications or the basic regions when it comes to redistricting. And so, and I think some of their argument is recognizing this.
Yeah, very much so. And again, you and I applauded that the Harvard admission case 2 years ago, and it was argued properly.
Right.
Okay, continuing. The 14th Amendment, the state contended, commands that the government may never use race as a stereotype or negative. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, once again, that goes back to what I was saying earlier. The Equal Protection Clause is designed to protect individuals, not groups.
Very well. Said, yet race-based redistricting rests on an invidious stereotype that all minorities, by virtue of their membership in their racial class, think alike and share the same interests and voting preferences. Similar to what we said earlier.
Yeah, good argument. Once again, this argument, once again, is focusing again on being individuals, not members of a group. Just because you're a member of a group doesn't mean you think a certain way. And if anything, that would be more racist than the claim the otherwise.
Wouldn't you have liked to have been a fly on the wall when the decision was made in the Louisiana State House to, well, we went from defending SB 8 to now we're opposing SB 8 over the course of the summer?
One wonders who the loud voices were, who brought some sense, and who went, okay.
Yeah, it would have been a fun one. All right, the black voters continued to defend the 2024 map, which, according to them, comports with the 14th and 15th Amendment guarantees of equal voting rights and the VRA's requirements. They argued that Section 2 is, in quotes, the crown jewel of civil rights legislation and falls within the heart of Congress's authority to enforce the Constitution.
Now, this idea of equal voting rights, understand what the Constitution says. What it says is that Congress shall make no law that creates an unequal environment. Not that government must make law to lift up a particular group. And so equal voting rights is all about restricting government from making law, not encouraging more law in the attempt to get a certain result.
Yeah, and that's really fundamental to some of the ideological differences between what we represent, which is, the original intent of the Constitution. And, you'll talk to a liberal and they'll say, well, it's the right thing to do because blacks were persecuted all these years. And again, you do not address past discrimination with future discrimination. And that's what's been going on. And a lot of this stuff came out of the civil rights era of the 60s, and they went too far. And some of that's starting to get pulled back.
Yeah, and this is not to argue that there were no historical wrongs, or that there haven't been or still isn't different discriminations. We recognize that in part of human nature, but the way, as you've said a number of times, the way to fix discrimination on one side is not to then resort to an opposite extreme where another group gets discriminated against in the process.
Yeah, it's interesting. Before we go too far, the Harvard ruling was correct. Yet they've continued to do other forms of affirmative action. They're trying to find ways of continuing what they were doing, and there will be a showdown with the Trump administration over that.
Right, and that Harvard case, what it did is it brought to the surface that there are actions, there are policies that unfairly penalize Asian and white applicants, giving preference to others. This was affirmative action on steroids, in a sense. Again, you don't fix one wrong by creating another wrong.
Agreed. College admissions should be based on merit.
Period.
Not immutable characteristics.
And of course, the argument is, well, how can they reach that merit if their schools are, a lesser school? That as individuals, then we need to see what we can do about getting our kids into the best institutions, whatever. That's what we do as individuals. I've always been one that argues there's no excuses. Everybody's capable. Ben Carson's a great example. One of my favorite examples when it comes to that anybody is capable of breaking out of whatever tough situation you start in is Nick Vujicic, which is this Australian pastor born with no arms, no legs. The guy goes swimming. He's a big-time public speaker and so on and so forth. No excuses.
Yeah, and it's fair to we're addressing the education system by kind of dismantling the Department of Education. So hopefully that helps with some of the school comparisons, because the Department of Education all of our education has gone downhill ever since it was created. Yeah, well, in an attempt to be fair and progressive, you've destroyed the entire thing. It's the old saying, right? You throw the baby out with bathwater. Yeah. Well, it's what is it? You hold back the more gifted students by catering to the lowest common denominator in education. And what you're going to wind up getting is the lowest common denominator. Yep. Section 2, they wrote, authorizes some consideration of race in redistricting. Doesn't say that, does it? No. But only when doing so is required to remedy identified racial discrimination. So they say if we can identify racial discrimination, we have to do something to fix it. That's their argument. If Section 2 is not available to protect black voters in Louisiana, they cautioned, it will not end discrimination there or lead to a race-blind society, but it may well lead to severe decrease in minority representation at all levels of government in many parts of the country. Okay. Now, of course, it could be argued that we currently probably may have over-representation, but again, and you have a little bit of a double standard here, of course. We want a race-blind society, yet we're going to have, Black History Month, Hispanic History Month, and so on and so forth.
And I grew up in North Long Beach, of one of the places I grew up in the just south of Los Angeles. And one of the things that I've always told people is I'm not racially blind. I know if a person who is not the same skin color as me is coming towards me. The thing is, that's not a factor in my decisions. It comes down to my individual interactions with them. Now, obviously, if someone's going to act a certain way, dress a certain way, we do form opinions. That's what we do as human beings. And that's up to us individually to address that. The question here isn't whether or not humans do that and if government has to help fix it. The question is, can government make laws regarding that? And ultimately, no, that's up to us. That's up to our culture. That's on us. Congress can make no law creating anything that goes outside the equality, equal protection under the laws.
Continuing, the non-African American voters argued Section 2 was inconsistent with the letter and spirit of the Constitution. We agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
The provision, they contended, does not eliminate hard-to-reach discrimination, as its supporters assert, but instead is now discrimination's main source and aggravator. By requiring race-based redistricting, which violates our colorblind Constitution. But even if Section 2 could apply in the abstract without running afoul of the Constitution, they continue it still violates the Constitution here. The black voters have not shown the persistent intentional racial discrimination in redistricting justifies the VRA's race-based sorting and balkanization of voters into mandated quota districts. And I love that sentence. Let's see, we got about 30 seconds before the break. Do you want to give yourself a quick plug, or do you want to give Mr. Zaki a plug?
Well, yeah, as a matter of fact, I had that in my mind. You're reading my mind. So as we get ready to go into our final break of the program, be reminded there are important elections coming up, and one of them is for governor in California. So those of you in California who are listening to this program, Leo Zaki for governor, leozaki.com. As for myself, DouglasVGibbs.com, navigation, 2, liberty.com, navigation to liberty.com.
I guess we can break on that.
Hey, all you entrepreneurs out there. Whether you have a small business or work from home, LaRue Press offers a virtual office and business address for all your business needs. Located at 280 Gregg Street, Suite 10, LaRue Press is your personal assistant for friendly all-day service. Need a conference room to meet with clients? You got it. With LaRue Press, you also get phone answering service, mail forwarding, package pickup, and even help branding your business. Call LaRue Press at 849-3814 or go online to lrpnv.com.
If you're living with diabetes and using insulin, you know the pain of pricking your fingers over and over again. Ouch! Well, by wearing a small remote device called a continuous glucose monitor, or CGM, you can reduce the pain of pricking your fingers. If you administer insulin 3 or more times per day or use an insulin pump, call now and learn how a CGM can help you.
Painless. No more pricking my finger.
No finger pricks.
Convenience. They delivered it free and they took care of all the paperwork.
You can reduce pain right away. Plus, it's accurate, easy to use, and helps you spend more time in range. And if you have insurance, you can get a new CGM at little or no out-of-pocket cost. Call now and get free shipping of your new CGM. Plus, we'll bill your insurance for you. 800-432-8150. 800-432-8150. 800-432-8150. That's 800-432-8150.
The All-Volunteer Nonprofit Assistance League, Reno Sparks, is working to improve lives in Washoe County. Annually, they provide new clothes and grooming essentials to over 3,000 children through Operation School Bell. Students in Transition addresses needs of homeless teens. Find out more by visiting their website, renosparks.assistanceleague.org. These activities are funded by Assistant League's Thrift Shop at 1701 Vassar Street, open 10 to 4 Monday through Saturday.
To join the conversation, call 844-790-TALK. That's 844-790-8255. Now back to the...
All righty. We'll welcome ourselves back. We're making perfect pace, and I think we're able to finish this with a few minutes to spare for some general discussion. So good job, Doug. Good pace. The Trump administration filed a brief in which it urged the justices to uphold the three-judge district court's decision. U.S. Solicitor General Dijon Sauer. Let's talk about him real quick. The Solicitor General is the DOJ's or the president's number one lawyer to argue in front of the Supreme Court. Sauer has got an amazing track record so far. I think it's probably the best win-loss record I've ever seen from a Solicitor General. Would you not agree?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's done well. Of course, a lot of that has to do with the fact that a lot of these lower court injunctions were ridiculous in the first place, so he had a pretty easy job. But that being said, good job, Mr. Sauer. He told the justices that Congress enacted the Voter Rights Act pursuant to its power to enforce the 15th Amendment, which bans only intentional, keyword there's intentional, racial discrimination in voting. Interpreting Section 2 of the VRA to mandate race-based redistricting, Sauer contended, is not required by the text of the provision, and it would decouple the statute from its function of smoking out voting practices and procedures that are likely intentionally discriminatory and would instead intentionally effectively compel racial gerrymanders.
And that actually goes with what I was saying earlier about Article 1, Section 4. The goal of the law is not supposed to create these provisions, but to look for when there's a bad law, say, okay, now that one's intentionally discriminatory, that one's intentionally whatever, and now Congress can take action through legislation to fix that. It is designed to root that out, not to create this broad law that controls everything.
Yeah, I think you've been. I think these arguments are right in line with what we were saying at the outset. So, how have the stakes changed? She says a ruling that strikes down the 2024 map and upholds the lower court's decision could affect not only Louisiana, but also when and how legislatures everywhere in the United States may consider race when drafting new maps. A report by two voting rights groups indicates that if legislatures cannot consider race to remedy racial discrimination in voting, the Congressional Black Caucus could lose up to 30% of its members, while Congressional Hispanic Caucus could lose up to 11% of its members. So like we said at the outset, this is a big deal. It could be worth 25 to 30 seats in the House. You combine that with some of the other issues going on with with changing the census so that illegal immigrants don't count towards apportionment. And like I said, we may be looking at a supermajority for Republicans in the very near future.
And this is happening as the black population in particular is moving towards Trump, towards the Republican side. So it's interesting because if as Rush Limbaugh used to say, if all of the illegal aliens were voting Republican, they'd be for a wall.
Indeed. So again, like we said, this has always been political, and the race part of it is being used as a political tool. That's been going on ever since LBJ. Who are the lawyers? Do we care about that?
And this is a law, by the way. It comes from that LBJ era originally. You have the, 1969, 1967, I can't remember which Voting Rights Act. And then you have the 1973 Voting Rights Act, which updated some of that. But that first one, that all comes out of the LBJ era and the Great Society ideas, which is a lot of what, affirmative action, all that came from.
The lawyers arguing this is the Louisiana Solicitor General. There is representing the non-African American challengers. The Janai Nelson is the president of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, will be representing the black voters. And the guy representing the Solicitor General is a guy named Hashim Mupan. So it's not going to be Sauer arguing in court today. He did write the brief. Who are the justices to watch at Wednesday's argument? Two key justices are likely to be Chief Justice Roberts and Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Didn't I say that? Both were in the majority 2 years ago in a case called Allen versus Milligan, in which the court both ruled that an Alabama congressional map likely violates the Voter Rights Act, but, here's the key point, rejected an invitation to undermine the power of Section 2. Nevertheless, Kavanaugh wrote a concurring opinion in that case in which he signaled sympathy for an argument that Alabama had not made in its filings in the Supreme Court. The idea, and this is strange for a Supreme Court justice to do. They usually only comment on the arguments that were made. So he's inserting a legal opinion. And that's that the idea that, like the use of race in college admissions, the authority to conduct race-based redistricting cannot extend indefinitely into the future. Key point there from Kavanaugh, which means, okay, it may have been justified to, kind of amend past racial discrimination. That doesn't mean you get to do it forever. If we're ever going to become a colorblind society, there's got to be a time limit.
I was thinking a third justice might also be someone to watch, Amy Coney Barrett. She's got some interesting ideas on what the Constitution says. While she claims to be an originalist, I think she's more of a textualist and sometimes a broad interpretation advocate. So she's going to be fascinating to watch as well.
Yeah, like I said, that's what I'll be doing the rest of the afternoon is listening to this. So, and I'll take notes.
Of course you will.
Or get a transcript.
And I have a feeling you and I will be doing videos or be right back here on ZakiRadio.com to talk about it again.
Yep. So when will the court decide the case? Well, I mentioned that earlier. There's no way to know when the justices will issue their decision in the case. However, with the state's primary election scheduled for April 18th, 2026, Louisiana's Secretary of State, Nancy Landry, has asked the court to rule quickly, ideally in December or early January.
Well, the fact that it's one of the upfront things that they're looking at, that tells us that we may see that ruling that quick. But we'll see. It depends. It really depends. You'll see sometimes these cases jockey for position based on the availability of information and so forth.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting. And you're going to, oh, by the way, watching the hearings this morning, the first 20 or 30 minutes of the recording, basically you could hear all the people protesting outside. And it's usual suspects. We, the people united will never be divided. Well, what about the other people that may be discriminated the other side? But that's just the typical stuff. But there is going to be an awful lot of protesting. Just like we saw with the Roe versus Wade, this is going to be one of the key seminal decisions of the year. And let's just hope it stays peaceful. We don't need any justices being threatened.
Well, and the question is, are these protests, are they grassroots, or are they something that's organized and funded and, has a political machine behind it somewhere? I ask that, but the latter is where I lean, in my opinion.
Well, it's interesting. When you watch the Supreme Court live on YouTube, they don't actually give you the camera view. It's all recordings. And so I couldn't tell if they were pre-made signs, as we've seen so often elsewhere. But that's the usual suspects.
Yeah.
We got a few more minutes. Any other topics we want to jump into?
Any other topics we want to jump into? How about this? Franklin and Marshall College to ditch their Ben Franklin mascot for a gender-neutral mascot. Who came up with that idea?
One can only guess.
And here's the reason why I bring this up. This whole gender neutrality, this whole idea of men can be girls and girls can be boys and so on and so forth. This is a push to, make us no different from each other. Well, let's go down to the basic idea of what it is. I remember reading in the Black Book of Communism a situation in Cambodia that I think explains what it's all about best. A man's son had passed away, and the father was crying about it, and the communist guard says, "You cannot cry. You're an oxen in the field. Crying makes you look too much human. You serve the state first." In other words, the idea of making us all the same, this is the idea that we're just cogs in a machine. We're not supposed to think outside of being cogs in the machine. But don't worry, the controllers of the machine will make sure you are safe and equal in misery. And that's what people are falling for. So all of this gender confusion, this gender that, it is a cultural Marxist push to make you nothing more than a cog in the machine for the system. But don't worry.
Well, I've got some good news.
You'll own nothing and be happy.
I've got some good news for you on that score.
Okay.
I just saw a polar study that came out. It was just earlier this week that showed the graphic of the amount of young people that are identified as transgender Peaked,
I saw that.
Peaked in 2023, and now it's gone down. It's been cut in half over the last 2 years.
It's a social construct, and now that side is not the dominant force, you're going to see it reduce greatly. Absolutely.
Well, I'm going to plug our shows on the Re-Federalist Report.
Okay.
I am Brady, a.k.a. the War Hamster, and my Rumble channel is War Space Hamster. Doug and I have got an ongoing series known as Re-Federalist Report, where we just talk about, constitutional issues, original intent. What we're doing right now is going through James Madison's notes from the Philadelphia Convention of 1787. And the reason we're doing that is if you want to talk about the original intent of the Constitution, you probably ought to go listen to the words of the people who wrote the darn thing. We're on about week 15 of that, and it's going to be another 30 or 40 weeks to go. But if you ever really want to learn the Constitution, that's a great place to start.
And we have a line by line. We're going line by line examination. And also every once in a while, we even throw in a little history about some of these speakers.
Yeah, and we'll have to divert from that to review some of these Supreme Court cases here in the next few months. So we're not going to, we'll get off topic a few times, but that really, we want to grind and get that done. I then want to go through, obviously, the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers. And I'd like to maybe skip over to the ratifying conventions. That might be a little bit quicker to get information out.
And both of us, between videos and shows, we're on air quite a bit. I mean, I'm on air 6 days a week, 7 shows, twice on Saturday, 1 every other day. Once again, DouglasVGibbs.com or navigation, the number 2 Liberty, navigation2liberty.com. And don't forget to visit Leo Zacky's website, leozaki.com. He's running for governor in California. All you Californians, do your research, leozaki.com.
Yeah, well, Doug, it's always a pleasure. Our Wednesdays are always very busy. I got to spend more than a couple hours with you, and then I miss you all week long. But no, it's not true. I watch some of Doug's shows, and when I pop in every once in a while. And
well, pop in tomorrow because I'm right here, folks, right here, 11 a.m. Pacific. I'm going to be right here. Pop in tomorrow, everybody.
With that, with no further ado, thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next week. Cheers.